For giving parenting advice, her son locked her in the basement and starved her for 3 days. But when the police came to arrest him, her next action shocked everyone. Subscribe, dear, to hear this unbelievable story of forgiveness. Your feedback means so much to me. Please let me know where you're watching from and whether you enjoyed this story. It's truly, truly important to me. Thank you so much.
My name is Sarah, and I am 68 years old. I know what you're thinking, because everyone who has heard my story thinks the same thing. Forgave them? How could she possibly forgive them? That's what the young police officer asked me, his face a mask of stunned disbelief as he wrapped a coarse blanket around my trembling shoulders. It's what my own sister screamed at me over the phone, her voice cracking with rage on my behalf. But they weren't there, in that cold, damp basement for 72 hours, with nothing but a pitcher of tap water, a box of stale cereal, and the crushing, suffocating knowledge that my own son, my James, had put me there. If you knew what I was thinking about in that darkness, the memories I was forced to confront, the one agonizing question I asked myself over and over again, what did I do wrong? Where did I fail as a mother? Then you might begin to understand the choice I made when I finally got out. This isn't a story about their crime. This is a story about my answer. It all began, as so many family tragedies do, with love, or what passes for it. After my husband passed, my son, James, and his wife, Maria, insisted I sell my old house and move in with them. "We don't want you to be alone, Mom," James had said. Maria had smiled her bright, brittle smile. "We can help take care of you, and you can help with little Leo." My grandson Leo was 5 years old, the light of my life. The thought of being with him every day was a balm to my grieving heart. So I sold my home, gave them a large portion of the proceeds to build a beautiful new extension on their house for me, and settled in, hoping for a peaceful, loving final chapter in my life. For a while it was. I helped with Leo, cooked, cleaned. I tried to be helpful, not a burden. But there was always a tension with Maria. She was a modern mother, full of ideas from books and blogs. My own old-fashioned, experience-based advice on raising children was, I could tell, unwelcome. She saw my suggestions not as help, but as criticism. My love for my grandson she saw as an attempt to usurp her authority. The more I tried to show my love through acts of service, the more she saw it as me trying to prove she was an adequate mother. James, my son, was caught in the middle, a weak and unwilling referee in a quiet, simmering war. He loved me. I knew that, but he was terrified of his wife's sharp tongue and her moods. He just wanted peace, at any cost. And I, it turned out, was the price. The final argument, the one that led to the basement, was over something so small, so trivial, it's almost laughable now. Leo had been acting out in school. I suggested, gently, that perhaps a more consistent bedtime and less screen time might help calm him. Maria overheard me. Her face tightened into a familiar hard knot of resentment. "Are you saying I'm a bad mother, Sarah?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "Of course not, dear," I said quickly. "It was just a thought." "Keep your thoughts to yourself," she snapped. "He's my son. I know how to raise him." Later I heard them arguing, her voice sharp and cutting, his a low pleading murmur. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew what it was about. Me, the interfering, judgmental old woman. The next morning, the atmosphere was icy. James wouldn't look at me. Maria just stared at me with cold, hard eyes. She was the one who said it, but I knew the words came from a decision they had made together. "We need a break from you, Sarah," she announced at the breakfast table. "From your constant help. You need to learn some boundaries." "What are you talking about?" I asked, confused. "You're going to spend a little time downstairs," she said, as if discussing the weather, "to think about your actions, to reflect on your role in this house." Before I could process what was happening, James, my son, stood up, his face pale, his eyes empty. "Come on, Mom," he said, his voice a dull monotone. He took my arm. He was strong. I was a 68-year-old woman. I had no choice. He led me to the basement door, unlocked it, and gestured inside. The basement was cold, damp, unfinished. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. He had placed a small cot in the corner with a pitcher of water and a family-sized box of cornflakes beside it. "James, no," I whispered, my heart beginning to hammer with a terrifying, unbelievable dread. "You can't do this." He wouldn't look at me. He just gently pushed me forward, into the darkness. "It's only for a few days, Mom," he said, his voice hollow. And then he closed the door. I heard the bolt slide shut, and I was alone, in the dark, a prisoner in my own son's house. The only sound was the frantic, desperate beat of my own heart.
The first 24 hours in that basement were a descent into a kind of madness I had never known. The darkness was not absolute. A single, grimy window high up on the wall let in a sliver of weak, gray daylight, just enough to illuminate the damp concrete walls, the dusty shelves of forgotten Christmas decorations, and the lumpy cot they had provided for me. The silence was punctuated only by the drip, drip, drip of a leaky pipe somewhere in the shadows, and the frantic, terrified beating of my own heart. My mind, a traitor in its own right, turned on me. It replayed every moment of my life as a mother. What did I do wrong? The question became a relentless, torturous loop. Did I love him too much? Did I not love him enough? Was I too strict? Too lenient? I remembered every argument, every time I had offered unsolicited advice, every worried phone call. I dissected every memory, searching for the fatal flaw in my mothering that could have possibly led to this, that I could have created a son capable of this cruelty. The shame and self-blame were a heavier weight than the bolted door. Twice a day, I would hear footsteps on the stairs. The bolt would slide back, the door would creak open, and Maria, my daughter-in-law, would place a plastic bowl of dry cereal and a bottle of water on the top step, her face a mask of cold indifference. She never spoke a word. She would just set down the provisions, as if feeding a stray animal she despised, and then lock the door again. The humiliation of it was a slow, grinding poison. My son, James, I never saw. He couldn't even face me. He sent his wife to be his jailer. On the second day, the self-blame began to curdle into something else. As I sat there chewing on dry flakes of corn that tasted like cardboard in despair, I looked at my surroundings, the damp floor, the cobwebs, the single bare bulb, and I thought of the love I had poured into my son, the sacrifices I had made, the life I had given him, and a new thought, cold and sharp as a shard of glass, pierced through the fog of my guilt. No mistake a mother makes, no matter how great, ever deserves this. This is not a failure of my love. This is a failure of his soul. That was the moment the victim in me died, and the survivor began to stir. My mind, once consumed with the past, now became laser-focused on the present, on escape. The door was solid, the lock heavy. No hope there. But the window, it was small, high up, covered in years of grime. It was a basement hopper window, the kind that tilts inwards. It was old, the frame likely rusted. It was my only chance. I spent hours studying it. I was a 68-year-old woman, not as strong as I used to be, but desperation is a powerful fuel. I dragged an old, rickety wooden crate from a corner, testing it to see if it would hold my weight. It wobbled, but it held. Climbing onto it, my whole body shaking with a mixture of fear and adrenaline, I could just reach the window latch. It was rusted shut, just as I had suspected. I pulled,
my arthritic fingers screaming in protest, but it wouldn't budge. I needed a tool, a lever. I scanned the dusty shelves. Old paint cans, forgotten toys, boxes of my late husband's junk. And then I saw it. An old, heavy-duty screwdriver from his toolbox, left behind years ago. Getting it down was another ordeal, but finally I had it in my hand, its weight solid and reassuring. I climbed back onto the crate. For what felt like an hour, I worked at the rusted latch, chipping away at the corrosion, trying to pry it open. My hands were raw, my muscles ached, but I didn't stop. The thought of my son and his wife living their lives upstairs in my clean, warm house while I was trapped down here like an animal fueled me. Finally, with a loud, groaning screech of metal, the latch gave way. I managed to tilt the window open just a few precious inches, not enough to climb through, but enough for my voice to escape. Now I had to wait. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Gable, was a sweet, elderly woman who was hard of hearing. Shouting for her would be useless unless she was right by the window. I knew she often worked in her small garden, which bordered the side of my house where the basement window was located. I just had to wait for the right moment. I waited all afternoon, my ear pressed to the small opening, listening. I heard the distant sound of children playing, a dog barking, a car passing, and then I heard it. The gentle snipping of garden shears. Mrs. Gable was outside, tending her roses. This was my chance. I took a deep breath, and I screamed. I screamed with all the pent-up fear, rage, and despair of the last 3 days. "Help! Please, help me! I'm locked in! Help!" I shouted until my throat was raw, my voice cracking. For a moment, there was only silence. My heart sunk. Had she not heard me? Then, a new sound. A voice, frail but clear, calling from the other side of the window. "Sarah! Sarah, is that you? Where are you?" "In the basement!" I cried, tears of relief now streaming down my face. "He locked me in! My son! Please, call the police!" I heard her gasp. "Oh, dear Lord, I'm calling them right now, Sarah. Just hang on." I slid down from the crate, my legs giving out from under me, and collapsed onto the cold, dusty floor. I was still a prisoner, but help was on the way. The game was about to change. The wail of a police siren, distant at first, then growing closer, was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of freedom, the sound of the end of my ordeal. I heard panicked footsteps upstairs, my son James and his wife Maria, their quiet, orderly world about to be shattered. I heard a loud, authoritative banging on the front door, then the splintering sound of the door being forced open. Heavy footsteps pounded through the house above me. "Down here!" I cried out, my voice hoarse. "In the basement!" A moment later, the bolt on my prison door was thrown back with a loud crack, and the door swung open. A young police officer stood there, his face a mixture of concern and shock as he took in the sight of me, a disheveled old woman huddled on a dusty cot. They helped me upstairs, wrapping me in a blanket, my legs unsteady beneath me. My son and his wife stood in the living room, surrounded by 2 other officers, their faces pale with terror. The game was up. The truth was out. The evidence of my imprisonment was undeniable. The locked door, the barren room, the pitcher of water and the box of cereal, my own frantic words. James wouldn't look at me. He just stared at the floor, a broken, pathetic man-child, his cruelty exposed. Maria, however, was trying to spin her web of lies even now. "She's confused, officers," she insisted, her voice high and shrill. "She's been having episodes. We were just trying to keep her safe. She could have wandered off." The lead officer, a stern, older man with tired eyes, just looked at her, then at the basement door, then back at her. He didn't say a word, but his silence was a deafening condemnation of her pathetic, transparent lies. He turned to me,
his voice gentle. "Ma'am, your son and daughter-in-law have committed a serious crime. Unlawful imprisonment, felony elder abuse. These are charges that carry significant prison time. We have more than enough to arrest them both right now. We just need your statement, your willingness to press charges." This was it. The moment of my victory, my justice. All I had to do was say the word, and they would be led away in handcuffs. I looked at Maria, at her venomous, terrified face, and I looked at James, my son, my beautiful lost boy. He finally looked up at me, and in his eyes, I saw not the monster who had locked me away, but the terrified, weak little boy I had raised. A boy so lost in his own inadequacies that he had allowed himself to be led into this act of unimaginable cruelty. I saw the shame, the self-loathing, and a profound, soul-deep terror. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. The rage, the desire for vengeance, the need to see them punished, it all just evaporated. What would justice achieve? It would send my only son to prison, destroying what was left of his life. It would cement the hatred and the pain between us forever. It would feed my anger, yes, but it would starve my soul. Whole life I had asked myself where I had gone wrong in raising him, and as I looked at his broken, terrified face, I found an answer. Perhaps my mistake wasn't a lack of discipline or too much love. Perhaps my mistake was that I had never truly taught him the meaning of grace, of forgiveness in the face of the unforgivable. And perhaps in this most terrible of moments, I had one last chance to be a mother, one last lesson to teach. I took a deep breath. I looked at the lead officer, whose pen was poised, ready to write the report that would seal my son's fate. "No," I said, my voice quiet but clear and firm. The officer frowned. "No, ma'am?" "No," I repeated. "I will not be pressing charges." The entire room went silent. The other officers stared at me. Maria looked at me with stunned disbelief, and James let out a sound, a choked guttural sob, and sank to his knees, his face buried in his hands, weeping uncontrollably. The lead officer was incredulous. "Ma'am, with all due respect, these people locked you in a basement. They starved you. They made a terrible, monstrous mistake. And the law may have its own judgment. But as his mother, my judgment is this: a prison cell will only harden his heart further. But perhaps, just perhaps, the weight of an undeserved forgiveness might be heavy enough to break it open and to let the light back in." I don't know if it was the right decision. I don't know if it was strength or a final foolish act of a mother's love, but it was my decision, my choice. To answer their cruelty, not with more cruelty, but with an act of grace so profound, so unexpected, that it would become its own kind of sentence, a life sentence of them having to live with the knowledge of what they did and of the forgiveness they never deserved. The police, frustrated, but bound by my wishes as the sole victim, eventually left, leaving the three of us in the ruins of our family. I was free. I was safe. But the path forward was a terrifying, uncertain landscape. My story was no longer about their crime. It was now about my impossible, unbelievable act of forgiveness and what would come next.
When the front door clicked shut behind the last police officer, the silence that descended was heavier and more suffocating than the darkness of the basement had ever been. We were three broken people, and a shattered house. The air thick with unspoken words, with shame, with a forgiveness that felt more like a judgment than a pardon. James was still on his knees, his face buried in his hands, his body racked with silent, shuddering sobs. Maria stood frozen by the wall, her arms wrapped around herself, staring at me with wide, unreadable eyes. It wasn't the look of gratitude I saw on her face. It was suspicion, fear. She couldn't comprehend my actions, and because she couldn't comprehend them, she couldn't trust them. People like Maria only understand transactions, power plays. An act of pure, unconditional grace was a foreign language to her, and she assumed it had to be a trick, a new, more cunning form of manipulation. I didn't say a word to either of them. I walked, my legs still unsteady, to the kitchen and put on the kettle for a cup of tea, my hands performing the familiar ritual with a detached calm. I was operating on a strange, otherworldly plane, my emotions packed away in a cold, quiet box. I had made my choice. Now I had to live with it. The first crack in their fragile, toxic alliance appeared that very evening. I could hear their whispers from the living room, sharp and angry. "What is she planning?" Maria hissed. "This is a game. She's playing a game. She's going to hold this over our heads forever." "She forgave us, Maria." James' voice was a raw, broken whisper. She saved me from prison." "She saved herself," Maria retorted. "Don't you see? A public trial would have been messy. She's just protecting her own reputation. Now she gets to be a saint while we have to live as her prisoners, grateful for every scrap she throws us." He didn't have a response to that. He was too broken to argue, his guilt a heavy cloak smothering his reason. I knew then that I couldn't stay. My act of forgiveness wasn't meant to be a tool for control, but Maria would always see it that way. And as long as she was in this house, her poison would continue to drip into my son's ear. My presence here was no longer a comfort. It was a catalyst for more conflict. I had to leave, not because he had kicked me out, but because I was choosing my own peace. The next morning, I packed a small bag. I had already called my sister in another state, and she had, without hesitation, told me to come and stay with her for as long as I needed. James found me at the front door, my suitcase by my side. "Mom?" he asked, his face a mask of panic. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to visit your Aunt Clara for a while, James. I think we all need some space to heal." "No," he cried, his voice cracking. "Don't leave me. Not now. I need you." "No, son," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You need to figure out who you are without me and without her. You need to stand on your own 2 feet and face what you have done. My staying here won't help you do that. It will only enable you to continue leaning on someone else." I looked past him, into the living room where Maria stood watching, her eyes cold and triumphant. She thought she was winning again. I turned back to James. "I love you. That will never change. But the woman who was your mother before you locked her in the basement, she's gone. I'm someone else now. And I need to go find out who that is." I kissed his cheek, a gesture that felt both intimate and final. "Call me when you're ready to talk about how you're going to fix yourself, not about how I am going to fix this for you." And I walked out, leaving him standing there, finally, truly on his own. My sister's house was a sanctuary. For weeks, I did nothing but sleep, read, and take long walks by the lake. And I talked. I told my sister everything. And she, in her quiet wisdom, just listened and held my hand and let me cry. The call from James came about a month later. "Maria left me, Mom," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "She said she couldn't live with a weak, spineless man who couldn't control his own mother. She packed her bags and was gone." "I'm sorry to hear that, James," I said, and I meant it. "No, you're not," he said. And for the first time, there was a flicker of bitter honesty in his voice. "And you shouldn't be. She was right about one thing. I was weak, and what I did to you, it was monstrous. There's no excuse. He was quiet for a long moment. I started going to therapy, Mom, and I got a job. A real one. Stocking shelves at the grocery store. It's not much, but it's mine. I'm paying my own bills. I felt a small, fragile seed of hope plant itself in my heart. That's good, James, I said softly. That's a very good start. I know it's too much to ask, he continued, his voice cracking. But when you come back, can I see you? Not to ask for anything, just to talk, to apologize properly, for as long as it takes. Yes, son.
Yes, son, I said, my own tears beginning to fall. Yes. When I come back, we can talk. My forgiveness had not been a pardon. It had been a catalyst. It had forced him to face the ugliness within himself without the easy excuse of blaming my anger. It had shattered his toxic marriage and set him on a long, hard road to self-respect. It was a cruel kind of grace, perhaps, but it was the only thing that could have saved him. I stayed with my sister, Clara, for 6 months. 6 months of quiet days, gentle conversations, and the slow, painstaking work of stitching my own soul back together. I didn't talk about James much, not at first. I just let the peace of my sister's home wash over me, a healing balm on a wound I hadn't realized was so deep. I had spent so many years being James's mom, a role that had become my entire identity, that I had forgotten how to simply be Sarah. I learned again. I read books. I started a small garden in Clara's backyard. I took long walks, and I slowly, carefully remembered who I was without him. James kept his promise. He called me once a week, every Sunday afternoon. Our conversations were short and awkward at first. He would tell me about his therapy sessions, about the humbling, difficult work of stocking shelves, about the quiet loneliness of his small apartment. He never asked for anything. He never pushed. He just reported in like a soldier checking in with his commanding officer. He was showing me, not telling me, that he was doing the work. His apologies came in small, fragmented pieces. A quiet, "I'm so sorry I wasn't a better son, Mom." A choked, "I think about what I did every day." I would listen, and I would say, "I know you are, James. Keep doing the work." I offered him no easy absolution. I knew, and he was learning, that forgiveness from others is meaningless until you can forgive yourself. After 6 months, I knew it was time for me to have my own home again. I used my savings to rent a small, lovely apartment in a quiet neighborhood near my sister. A place that was mine, filled with my things, my peace. It was the first time in my adult life I had lived truly alone, and it was a revelation. It wasn't lonely. It was serene. The first time James came to visit me in my new home, a year after the incident, he stood in the doorway looking nervous, like a stranger. He brought me a small potted orchid. "It's beautiful, James," I said. "I'm trying to learn how to care for things properly," he said quietly, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the flower. That day we had coffee at my kitchen table, and we talked, really talked. He told me about the darkness he had found in himself, the weakness and resentment that had allowed Maria to twist him into a monster. And I told him about the fear and helplessness I had felt in the basement. It was a painful, necessary conversation,
the lancing of a wound that had been festering for years. I did not forgive him that day, not in a single declarative moment. Forgiveness, I was learning, wasn't a switch you could flip. It was a slow dawning light. It was the absence of the constant burning anger. It was the ability to see my son again, not just the man who had betrayed me, but the broken man who was trying with all his might to put himself back together. Our relationship was rebuilt, not on the old, fraught foundations of duty and codependence, but on a new, fragile ground of honesty and respect. He started his own small handyman business, using the skills his father had taught him. He was good at it. He was reliable. He was proud of his work. He never asked me for a dime. He was finally becoming a man. 2 years after I had walked out of his house, he invited me to have dinner with him and a woman he had been seeing, a quiet, kind school teacher. I went. I watched him with her, how he treated her with a gentleness and a profound respect I had never seen from him before. He listened to her. He valued her opinion. He was a partner to her, not a king demanding tribute. Later that evening, after she had left, he turned to me. "Thank you for coming, Mom."
She seems lovely, James, I said honestly. He nodded. She is. He took a deep breath. Mom, he said, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. I know that what I did is unforgivable. I know that. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for it. But I need to know. Can you ever look at me and not see the man who locked you in that basement? I looked at my son, at the man he was now, a man defined not by his worst moment, but by his struggle to rise above it. The anger was gone. The coldness in my heart was gone. All that was left was a deep, complex, and enduring love. I see the man who is here now, James, I said softly, reaching out to take his hand. And I am so, so proud of him. The tears that welled in his eyes were not tears of shame this time, but tears of grace. And in that moment, I knew we were going to be okay. The past would always be a part of our story, a dark, terrible chapter. But it was no longer the whole book. We had started a new chapter, together, and it was a story of hope.